Before Mao Zedong became the most powerful leader of China, he was just the son of farmers from a small village. But he grew up during a time when the old system of China was slowly collapsing. The government was weak, foreign countries were interfering, and many Chinese believed that their country needed to change. Amidst this chaos, the story began of a man who would be known as a hero to some and a ruthless dictator to others. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893 in Shaoshan, a rural area in Hunan province. His family was not poor compared to most of the farmers in their village. His father, Mao Yicheng, grew up in poverty, but through hard work, saving, and selling rice, he was able to buy more land and improve their family's livelihood. They were not among the richest families in China, but they had their own house, farm, enough food, and the ability to send their children to school. His mother, Winky Mei, was a devoted Buddhist. She was known for being kind and generous, the opposite of Mao's strict and quick-tempered father. He had younger siblings, including Mao Zemin and Mao Zedong. Even as a child, Mao helped out in the fields, but he was more interested in reading than in a lifetime of farming. In the village school, he was taught using old Confucian texts. But Mao didn't like the system that was all about memorization and obedience. He loved reading stories about war, rebellion, brave warriors, and people who fought against the powerful. Even at this point, you can see that he wasn't content to accept the life his family chose for him. When he reached the age of 13, he stopped attending regular school and worked more often in the fields. His father wanted him to learn how to run the farm and manage the family business. But Mao didn't want his life to end there. When he was a teenager, his father arranged his marriage to Luo Yishu, a woman from a neighboring family. According to Mao's own account, he did not accept the marriage as a real union. They also did not live together as a normal married couple. Luo died after a few years. For Mao, that arranged marriage was an example of an old tradition that controlled the lives of young people, especially women. It further strengthened the sense of isolation. He liked the idea of escaping the life that was prepared for him. He fought to return to school. He studied in another place in Hunan and eventually went to Changsha, the provincial capital. This was a big change for a young man who came from a quiet village. In Changsha, he saw new schools, newspapers, political groups, and students who openly questioned the government. There he realized that it wasn't just his own life that had problems. The whole of China was going through a deep crisis. For a long time, the country was ruled by the Qing Dynasty. But by the time of Mao, its power was already weakening. One of the biggest reasons was China's successive defeats against foreign countries. From 1839 to 1842, the Qing government fought against Britain in the First Opium War. After China's defeat, the Qing government was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking in 1842. Hong Kong was given to Britain, and several ports were opened for foreign trade. This was followed by other agreements that granted significant privileges to foreigners. Many Chinese called these unequal treaties because the power between the two sides was not equal. Instead of being able to decide freely, China was forced to follow the wishes of stronger countries. It was not only countries from Europe that became a threat. In 1894, the First Sino-Japanese War began because of the conflict between China and Japan over Korea. Once again, China was defeated. This was a great humiliation for the Qing government. For a long time, China had considered Japan a smaller country, but the war showed that Japan was able to develop a modern military, industry, and government system much faster. While other countries were already using modern ships, weapons, trains, and factories, change in China was slow. Because of this, many students and intellectuals began to ask, why is their country being left behind? Is tradition the problem? Is the emperor weak? Or does the whole system need to be changed? The crisis worsened in 1908 when Emperor Guangxu died. Just a day later, the powerful Empress Dowager Tixi also died. The one placed on the throne was Puyi, a young child not even 3 years old. Of course, a child cannot rule. The real power went to the officials and royal ministers. But for many Chinese, it was clear that the old government, slow to change, could no longer save the country. The return was slow. Many of them were influenced by Sun Yat-sen, a leader who wanted to end the Qing dynasty and establish a republic, the Republic of China.
Sumiklab ang pag-aalsa sa
When Mao heard about the revolution, he joined as a soldier along with his brother in Hunan. He was not yet a communist at that time. He was just a young boy who believed that the Qing dynasty needed to be removed and that China needed a new direction. The revolution succeeded. In early 1912, the young Puyi abdicated the throne, ending more than 2,000 years of imperial rule in China. It was replaced by the Republic of China, not yet the People's Republic of China, which would only be established by Mao several decades later in 1949. For the young Mao, the fall of the emperor proved something important. No matter how long a system stays in place, it can be overthrown if enough people are willing to fight. But the emperor's fall did not immediately bring peace. Instead, it started a more chaotic struggle to determine who would truly lead the new China. After the emperor fell, China did not immediately become stable. The new Republic of China was weak. In many places, warlords were the real rulers. They had their own armies, laws, and taxes. They often fought each other to gain more territory. During this time, Mao Zedong continued his studies at Hunan First Normal School. He loved reading about philosophy, politics, and different ways of governing. He was also active in student organizations. He helped form a group that gave students a voice against the school's policies. In 1918, Mao graduated and went to Beijing, where he got a low-ranking position as an assistant at the library of Peking University. He was not the chief librarian. His only duty was to help organize and catalog the books. But this job became important because it was there that he met Li Daxiao, one of the first to teach Marxism in China. According to Marxism, society is divided between those who control land, business, and wealth, and the workers and farmers who depend on them. Mao became interested in this idea. He saw that this could be used to explain why so many Chinese people are poor, while only a few hold wealth and power. In 1921, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, was founded. Mao was among the 13 delegates who attended its first Congress in Shanghai. The party was still small at that time. Mao was not the main leader either. Chen Duxiu and Li Daxiao were even more well known as the first advocates of communism in China. But Mao noticed something that would be important for his rise. In other countries, the communist movement focused on factory workers. In China, there were more farmers than industrial workers. Many of them did not own land, paid high rents, and were often buried in debt. Mao believed that if the farmers were organized, they could become the greatest force in a revolution. At first, the Communist Party and the Kuomintang, or KMT, were not yet enemies. The KMT was a nationalist party that wanted to unite China and defeat the warlords. Because they had a common enemy, the KMT and the Communists temporarily worked together. But everything changed when Chiang Kai-shek's power in the KMT grew stronger. As communist groups and labor unions increased, landowners, businessmen, and conservative officials became afraid that their land and businesses would be taken away. In April 1927, forces allied with Chiang attacked communists and labor organizers in Shanghai. Many were killed, arrested, or disappeared. This was called the Shanghai Massacre, or the April 12th Purge. The claim that more than 300,000 communists were definitely killed in Shanghai is not true. The exact number is unclear, but hundreds were killed in the city, and thousands more fell victim to a broader persecution in different parts of China. This was where the alliance and cooperation between the two parties was finally destroyed. The long conflict between the KMT and the Communist Party began. After a failed uprising in Hunan, Mao and his men retreated to the mountains. He knew they couldn't match the larger KMT army in a direct battle. That's why they used guerrilla warfare. They quickly attacked the weak points of the enemy, then retreated before the larger forces arrived. They used the mountains and remote villages as their base. To gain the support of the farmers, the communists promised to reduce the power of the landowners and distribute the land. Because of this, some farmers joined their army, but there were also places where those considered enemies of the revolution were violently arrested and killed. By 1934, the KMT had surrounded the main communist base in Jiangxi. There, they were forced to flee. This was the beginning of the Long March. Thousands of communist soldiers and supporters traveled across rivers, mountains, and dangerous places while being pursued by the KMT. This was not simply a successful military mission. It was a desperate retreat to save the remaining communist forces. Many died due to fighting, hunger, disease, cold, and extreme exhaustion. In the midst of the journey, Mao's position within the party grew stronger. At that time, he was the chairman of a communist government established in Jiangxi. He gradually became the main leader of the party as the Long March continued. A small part of their forces survived and reached northern China. Even though they lost so much, the Communist Party used the Long March as a symbol of their resilience and sacrifice. But while the KMT and the Communists were fighting, the threat from Japan was growing. Japan occupied Manchuria in 1931. In 1937, a wider invasion of China began. Japanese forces occupied many cities, many civilians were killed, and the war left widespread destruction. Because of this, the KMT and the Communist Party temporarily worked together again against Japan. The KMT faced most of the major conventional battles. Meanwhile, the Communist forces often used guerrilla attacks in rural areas and behind Japanese lines. In 1940, the Communist forces launched the 100 Regiments Offensive. They attacked the railways, bridges, and supply lines used by Japan in northern China. The Kuomintang bore a larger part of the direct fighting against Japan. China also received aid from the United States and other allies. In August 1945, the Soviet Union attacked the Japanese forces in Manchuria. At the same time, Japan was also collapsing in the wider war in the Pacific. Japan surrendered in 1945, but when their common enemy was gone, the KMT and the Communist Party fought each other again. The KMT had more soldiers and weapons. They also controlled the major cities, but corruption, inflation, and food shortages worsened in the areas they held. Many soldiers and ordinary citizens lost trust in Chiang Kai-shek's government. Meanwhile, the Communist Party grew stronger in the villages because of their promises about land and their better organization of the farmers. By 1948 and 1949, the Communist forces won a series of major battles. On October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong declared the establishment of the People's Republic of China. Chiang Kai-shek and the KMT retreated to Taiwan, where they continued as the Republic of China. For many Chinese, Mao was the leader who defeated the warlords who survived the Civil War and once again united a large part of the country. But after gaining power, he was no longer just the leader of a revolution. He now controlled the most populous country in the world, and this is where the most dangerous part of his leadership would begin. When Mao Zedong gained full power in China, he wanted to change the country immediately. He didn't want it to remain poor and dependent on agriculture. He wanted China to quickly have many factories, steel, dams, and modern industry. So in 1958, he launched the Great Leap Forward. It promised a lot. In just a few years, China would catch up with the powerful industrial countries. But for that to happen, the government forced people to change their entire way of life. Small farms were combined into large groups called people's communes. The land, equipment, animals, and harvest were now controlled by the commune. Many families could no longer freely plant or cook for themselves. In some places, they were fed in communal kitchens and were expected to follow the work assigned by the government. They were not only made to do farming. Ordinary people were also ordered to make steel in small furnaces built in villages and backyards. Because they lacked training and proper equipment, much of the metal they produced was low quality and almost useless. Even worse, Many farmers were taken away from their fields to work on steel production, dams, and other projects. So while the government was raising targets for industry, the number of people planting and harvesting food was decreasing. There was also intense pressure on local officials. If their reports were low, they could be accused of not being loyal to the revolution. So many lied and reported a bigger harvest than what was actually obtained. Because the government believed the false numbers, it took a huge amount of grain from the villages. There were places where almost nothing was left for the farmers who actually planted it. At the same time, the government implemented incorrect farming methods that were not properly tested. People were forced to plant crops too close together and to till the soil too deeply. Instead of increasing the harvest, many crops were ruined. Another major mistake was the Four Pests campaign. People were ordered to kill rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows because they were considered pests. Tigers, leopards, and wolves were not the main targets of the campaign. As stated in the source, when sparrows were almost wiped out in some areas, the insects that the birds used to eat multiplied. This caused even more damage to the crops. There were also droughts and floods in some parts of China, but nature was not the only cause of the disaster. A bigger problem was the wrong policies on forced labor, false reports about the harvest, and the continued collection of grain, even when the villages were already starving. By 1959, it was clear that food production was declining, but many officials were afraid to tell the truth to Mao. Anyone who questioned the plan could be labeled an enemy of socialism. Because of this, the true extent of the hunger was hidden while people were still being forced to meet impossible targets. Food gradually ran out. There were people who ate grass, leaves, tree bark, and anything they could find to chew on. There were also reports of people eating their pets and even cannibalism in some areas. There is no single definite count of those who died. Historians have different estimates, but many studies put it in the tens of millions. One commonly used estimate is around 30 million deaths from hunger and related effects. In 1959, Mao stepped down from his position as chairman of the People's Republic of China. He did not step down as chairman of the Communist Party. He was replaced as state chairman by Liu Shaoqi, but Mao remained the most powerful leader within the party. By 1961, the harshest parts of the Great Leap Forward were gradually removed. Some families were once again allowed to farm for themselves. The forced commune system was scaled back and practical rationing methods returned. But after the disaster, Mao's direct control over daily administration weakened. More practical leaders like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping helped fix the economy. For Mao, this was dangerous. He was afraid that China was moving away from his kind of revolution. He believed there were leaders within the Communist Party who wanted to bring back capitalism. So in 1966, he launched the Cultural Revolution. The stated goal of this was to purge China of old ideas, old culture, old customs, and people called capitalist roaders. But it also served as a way for Mao to remove his critics and once again strengthen his personal control. He encouraged students to form groups called the Red Guards. They carried the Little Red Book, a collection of Mao's sayings. They considered him not just a political leader, but almost a perfect guide who should not be questioned. Some Red Guards raided schools, houses, government offices, temples, and museums. Teachers, intellectuals, former officials, landowners, and even ordinary people suspected of being disloyal to Mao were publicly humiliated. Many were beaten, imprisoned, tortured, forced to confess to things they didn't do, or sent to forced labor. There were also teachers who were killed by their own students. But it's not necessary to claim that Mao personally ordered every Red Guard to kill their professors. It's more accurate to say that his calls and support for rebellion empowered the groups that committed acts of violence. China's history and culture also became targets. Old books, paintings, statues, temples, tombs, and other things called symbols of the Four Olds were destroyed. Many cultural sites in Beijing and other places were damaged or completely lost. But the claim that in 1970, Mao personally ordered the Great Wall to be demolished so its bricks could be used for houses and dams is not supported. It's true that there were parts of the Great Wall where local people took materials at different times, but there is not enough solid evidence to present the source's claim as a direct order from Mao. As the Cultural Revolution intensified, different Red Guard groups also fought each other. They all claimed to be the true defenders of Mao in some cities, which led to armed clashes. Eventually, the People's Liberation Army was used to stop the chaos. Many young people were sent to remote provinces to work in the fields and learn from the farmers. During this time, Mao's personality cult grew significantly. His image could be seen in homes, schools, factories, and government buildings. His words were recited daily, read, and repeated. A remarkable example of this happened in 1968. Mao was given mangoes by the foreign minister of Pakistan. He passed them on to the factory workers who helped after the unrest at Tsinghua University. Because mangoes were rare and almost unknown in much of China at that time, some considered it a special gift from Mao himself. Some mangoes were preserved in formaldehyde. Wax and plastic replicas were also made, paraded, and displayed in factories. The fruit itself wasn't really what mattered. The mango was used as a symbol of Mao's supposed love for the workers. This showed how powerful the propaganda was and how deep the cult of personality around him ran. There is also a claim in the source that a man was killed because he compared the mango to a sweet potato. Stories like this have appeared in some accounts about the mango cult, but it's hard to prove the exact details. That's why this shouldn't be presented as something that definitely happened. In terms of foreign policy, China also distanced itself from the Soviet Union. Mao criticized the leaders of the USSR as revisionists who were allegedly deviating from true communism. His own interpretation of the revolution, which focused on the peasants, guerrilla warfare, continuous class struggle, and personal leadership, became known as Maoism. But the source is wrong in saying that Mao was the one who opened China to widespread globalization and free trade. China and the United States began improving relations in the early 1970s. President Richard Nixon visited China in 1972, which was a major turning point in the relationship between the two countries. But the widespread economic reform, foreign investment, and China's opening to international trade happened after Mao died. This began in earnest under Deng Xiaoping's leadership in 1978. Those reforms, not the Cultural Revolution, became the major foundation of the rapid growth of China's modern economy. The unusual conversation between Mao and Henry Kissinger in 1973 really did happen. According to the official transcript of the United States government, Mao joked that China could send 10 million women to the United States. The people in the room laughed, so it wasn't a serious trade offer. As shown in the source, it was actually a rude and insulting joke during a diplomatic meeting. There are also many personal stories about hygiene, sexual relationships and mistresses, and mistreatment. Most of these come from memoirs and accounts that are still debated by historians, so it's not safe to present all the details in the source as absolute truth, especially the claims about diseases, young girls, and the personal life of her husband. What is more clearly documented is this. As Mao grew older, his body weakened, but he remained at the center of power. He had a series of health problems. He had difficulty speaking and moving in the last years of his life. At the same time, the struggle within the government continued between the radicals, allied with his wife, Jiang Qing, and the more pragmatic leaders who wanted to fix the country. On September 9, in 1976, Mao Zedong died at the age of 82. Countless Chinese mourned. For them, he was still the leader who united mainland China, and he restored the country's strength after a long period of war and foreign control. But for those who survived the famine, political purges, forced labor, and the Cultural Revolution, they remember a different Mao. He was not buried in a crystal casket. His body was embalmed and placed in a glass display case at the mausoleum in Tiananmen Square, where visitors can still see it. Just weeks after his death, Jiang Qing and the other radical leaders, known as the Gang of Four, were arrested. The new government gradually ended the policies of the Cultural Revolution. After a few years, the Communist Party officially acknowledged that the Cultural Revolution caused great chaos and damage to the country. Mao's impact cannot be denied. Under his leadership, the country became a single powerful state. Mainland China became a unified, powerful state, and many people gained wider access to basic education and public health. But at the same time, his wrong decisions and forced campaigns brought hunger, fear, destruction, and the deaths of countless citizens. And the China that became an economic powerhouse was not built by continuing all of his policies. It became stronger when the leaders who followed turned their backs on many of the ideas that caused the greatest tragedies during Mao's time.